RepoMan. It's not just a job, it's an adventure, and a very weird one at that. It was 1984 when RepoMan hit the screens to great critical acclaim. It tells the story of Otto, played by Emilio Estevez, a misguided punk youth lacking in direction, when a car repossession agent named Bud, played by Harry Dean Stanton, takes him under his wing to teach him the ways of the Force when it comes to car repossession, giving Otto a new career opportunity. However, things get weird when Otto is in a pursuit of a 1964 Chevrolet Malibu, of which this strange and mysterious car contains a bizarre glowing light, which comes out of the car's boot and evaporates anyone who looks into it. Oh yeah, that and the car may or may not be linked to extraterrestrials. In this car action movie slash B-movie comedy slash science fiction fantasy movie that helps cement Estevez as an uprising 80s star. And if Maximum Overdrive has taught us anything, that is Emilio Estevez seems to have a love for starring in B-cult movies about weird shit happening to cars. So buckle up and strap yourself in for a bumpy ride as we look into 10 things that you probably don't know about RepoMan. And if you already did know them, then you get to join the Minty Nerd Squad Club? Yeah, anyway, let's check it out.
Always on the lookout for a few good men.
Screw that. Ain't gonna be no RepoMan. No way.
It's too late. You already are.
Number 10. The movie's budget. Although RepoMan is a pretty polished looking movie, it may come as a surprise to know the movie had a very tiny budget. In fact, the movie was just made for a mere $1.5 million, proving that even movies with the smallest of budgets can still be big hits. The movie was written by Alan Cox based on an idea from his friend and collaborator Dick Rude. Cox was an aspiring British filmmaker who moved to LA in order to try and further his career in filmmaking, where he co-formed Edge City Productions, where he came up with a story about a young RepoMan on the hunt for a radioactive 1964 Malibu, to which Universal Pictures showed interest in the script, and so RepoMan was assigned with its micro budget. To be fair though, the movie in no way looks on the cheap. In fact, it actually boasts some pretty spectacular special effects, like the glowing car, which actually hardly cost any money to do, as all the crew had to do to achieve this effect was cover the car in reflective paint, creating an impressive visual for the measly price of a can of paint. Cox would go on to direct the biopic Sid and Nancy, along with providing the script for Terry Gilliam's Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Number 9. Missing Malibu. If being limited to a tiny budget wasn't tough enough, while filming RepoMan, the production crew only had one 1964 Chevrolet Malibu. So as you would imagine, if anything happened to that car, it would spell disaster. Well, sadly, that is exactly what happened, as while filming, the Malibu was stolen, leaving the film's crew in an understandable state of absolute panic. The production crew had to set out to somehow find another exact 1964 Malibu, but when it came time to start filming again, the car was found. I guess there's an irony that RepoMan is about tracking this Malibu down, and in a case of life imitating art, that's exactly what happened behind the scenes, proving that sometimes life can be stranger than fiction.
Well, yeah, I mean if you're making a movie about a car, the one thing you don't want to have happen is to, lose the car.
Number 8. The Woes of Harry Dean Stanton. Apparently filming RepoMan was no easy challenge for actor Harry Dean Stanton. The actor may have come face to face with Alien along with Christine, but it seems that he was no match for RepoMan's director, Alan Cox, as the two supposedly clashed a lot throughout filming. The actor felt that his ideas and inputs into his character were often ignored and rejected. He got into hot water in a scene involving him swinging a baseball bat, on the account that the bat that he used wasn't a prop but a real one. with him insisting that audiences will be able to tell if a fake bat was used for the scene. Research made for this episode suggests that Stanton was trying to contribute creative input into the movie, but all his ideas were rejected, leaving a sense of frustration from both Stanton and Cox. So much so, it was apparently even considered having Stanton removed from the movie's production.
For the record, I really like the works of both Harry Dean Stanton and Alex Cox, but this incident opens up an interesting debate. Should actors be allowed to have creative input into a movie's development? Or should that just be left up to the writers and powers that be behind actually making the movie?
Number 7. Casting possibilities. When it came time to casting the movie, Alan Cox originally was going to cast his friends in the lead roles. Frequent collaborator with Cox, Dick Rude, was up for the lead role of Otto, and actor Cy Richardson was in line to play Bud. Richardson is an actor who has played bit roles in many movies, including They Live. However, when Universal Pictures got on board the project, they wanted names who were more marketable and likely to fill up cinema seats, where Dennis Hopper was then offered the role of Bud, but turned it down. Some of the powers that be oddly wanted Mick Jagger in the role of Bud. Yeah, just imagine Mick Jagger in this movie. As if it wasn't weird enough. But Cox stuck with Harry Dean Stanton, and rising star Emilio Estevez was cast as Otto, despite Estevez's agents strongly being against the idea as they didn't want him starring in smaller movies. But regardless, he was cast, and both Dick Rude and Cy Richardson would go on to play smaller roles in the film. So at least it's nice to know that they weren't removed from the film entirely.
But seriously though, just imagine having a Bud who moves like Jagger.
Number 6. Comic book. RepoMan is actually based on a comic book. Kind of. Sort of. In the sense that a comic book predated the actual movie. The comic was drawn up by the movie's writer and director Alan Cox himself, in which you can see Cox's comic book adaptation used some very interesting style techniques that almost looks kind of like something out of Beavis and Butthead, along with other cartoons which came out during the 90s. However, this comic strip by far outdates Beavis and Butthead and those other 90s cartoons, proving that Cox's artistic style is probably ahead of its time. The comic was drawn up in order for Cox to try and entice interest into the movie. After all, creating something more visual would probably help for the producers to get a better understanding of the film, especially as one as unique as RepoMan, of which co-creator Dick Rude described as being, quote, punk rock meets science fiction in Ronald Reagan's house. Maybe a premise like that couldn't be expressed in text and had to be demonstrated on a more visual level. The comic only consisted of several pages, and thankfully the right person saw it. Number 5. RepoMan exists because of a monkey.
Give me a bomb!
I already mentioned in my Buffy the Vampire Slayer episode how weird it was that the original movie happened because Dolly Parton saw the script and liked it and funded the project. Thus Buffy exists thanks to the country singer. Well, RepoMan goes one step further in weirdness, as the project took off thanks to Michael Nesmith. Yes, as in that guy from the 60s pop group The Monkees. You know, the one who always wore the green beanie? Well, it seems that in the 80s he ditched the green beanie in favour of radioactive alien cars, as after getting hold of the comic that Alan Cox drew up, as mentioned before, Nesmith was so excited and enthusiastic with the idea, he became the movie's producer, and was the one who got Universal Pictures involved in the project. So the next time you watch the awesomeness that is RepoMan, just remember that what you're watching wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for the former Monkey band member. Other movie producing credits Nesmith has to his name include Tapehead and Time Rider. I haven't seen either.
Wow, so many old rock stars seem to be turning up in my show these days, as they seem to be part of movies that I'm talking about. I mean, Christ, next we're going to be hearing that the guy from Fleetwood Mac starred in the Arnold Schwarzenegger film Running Man. Oh wait, that happened! Yep, I already covered that one.
Number 4. The movie is based on truth. Sort of.
So
Okay, so apart from the whole alien car aspect, there is actually a lot of truth behind RepoMan, especially in regards to the ethics and daily grind of being a repo man, along with the lifestyle and dangers that come out of such a career. Alan Cox actually spent some time with a real repo man called Mark Lewis, where he used his experience with Lewis as a source of inspiration to how being a repo man would be displayed on the screen. Most of what is seen and spoken, particularly by the Bud character, is basically just rehashed from Lewis. So when the Bud character says things like,
See, an ordinary person spends his life avoiding tense situations. RepoMan spends his life getting into tense situations.
we can fully understand just how much of a dangerous job being a repo man must be. Number 3, Alan Cox could have made an entirely different movie. As mentioned, Alan Cox left the UK and headed to Hollywood to try and further his career in filmmaking, where he came up with several projects to try and entice film producers into making, and one of them of course being RepoMan. However, another one of Cox's ideas couldn't be more further away from RepoMan, as the alternative was a war drama about a World War II deserter. The idea was pitched to United Artists, who found it too British, which is a weird thing to say from the production team of the James Bond movies. And they also felt that it would be too expensive and too anti-war. So Cox focused more on RepoMan instead. But just imagine if the interest was never shown in RepoMan, and thus it was never made. Does that mean that Cox would have focused more on this other movie that is actually worlds apart from RepoMan? Number 2, the Malibu nearly went up against the greatest opponent ever.
Just give me a Pepsi, please. All I want is a Pepsi. And she wouldn't give it to me. All I wanted was a...
As bizarre as it sounds, Muhammad Ali was offered a cameo in RepoMan. Hey, the movie is so random and insane as it is, would an Ali cameo really seem that strange and unusual? The production team learned that Ali was attending a gym near to where the movie was being filmed, so Ali was approached and offered a cameo in the movie, in a scene where the champ tries to take on the car when it's glowing, but incidentally fails, with the gag being not even the great and legendary Muhammad Ali, who once even took on Superman, could take on this troublesome car. However, Ali declined the bit part, and thus the sequence was filmed without him.
It's a shame because I would have loved to have seen Muhammad Ali beat the crap out of that car.
Number 1, failed sequel. There was actually a sequel planned for RepoMan called Waldo's Hawaiian Holiday. The long-awaited sequel was pitched to Universal during the 90s, but the studio didn't seem to be interested in the project, so director Alan Cox started funding the project by himself. However, the project fell through and collapsed in on itself when Emilio Estevez dropped out of the project. Estevez claims that the script just didn't make any sense, so to avoid starring in what he felt was probably a dud, he left the project. And Cox felt that when Estevez left the film, it pretty much died. To me, it sucks that we never got a RepoMan sequel. I mean, why is it during the 90s Estevez can happily star in all those Mighty Ducks sequels, but he couldn't star in a RepoMan one? However, it did eventually happen, sort of, as Waldo's Hawaiian Holiday was finally released as a comic book, giving readers and fans an insight into what the RepoMan sequel would have been like.
Well guys, that was my look into RepoMan, yet another awesome B-movie added to my show, and just like many others, I highly recommend it. If you haven't seen it, don't let the title of it fool you. Yes, it's about a RepoMan, but there is actually a lot more to it than that. Anyway, I'm Minty, and I never forget the RepoMan code. See ya!